here we go. Got my tea. We got some Bigelow chamomile tonight. I'm Dylan DeFeo, your very own DD on the keys. It's great to be here. Oh, I'm feeding back, aren't I? Let me fix that up. There we go. That's much better. So, let's get right to it. So today, we're on the Rhodes once more. We're on the Rhodes again. And we got my pedalboard here. We're going to be playing some fun stuff, demonstrating what I like to do, how I like to demonstrate some of my effects, things that I like to do when I play with bands, and some songs that feature some of these classic effects. But first and foremost, we have to do some fulfilling of requests I didn't get to last time. I'm going to start with a little bit of Steely Dan for Mr. Devlin. We're going to do a little bit of Do It Again. That was for you, Mr. Devlin. A little bit of Steely Dan as per your request from last week. Better late than never, as they say. Hi, I'm Dylan DeFeo. If you're just tuning in, welcome to our Rhodes Effects Pedal Night. This is going to be a lot of fun. If you're just tuning in as well, don't forget that I'm accepting gratefully donations via my PayPal that's attached to the page. You know, it's a tough time for a lot of musicians out there, and we're streaming to stay alive. So if you find it in your heart, go ahead and donate away. I would be extraordinarily grateful. Oh man, this tea is so darn good. Very calming too, is something that I needed this time of day. But anyway, so let's get right down to the business here. So there's a lot of classic sort of effects that we tend to use with a Fender Rhodes. It's a very, very versatile instrument. And what I love about it is that it has its own very signature sound just on its own. You know, piano-like in touch, but more xylophone-like in sound quality, very Celesta-like. So that's it on its own, especially in the high range, you get that. But even just some simple things that are built into the keyboard first before we even go to the stomp boxes over here can really change the sound drastically. I mean, just EQ alone on a Rhodes can change the character. So here's everything. This is the Rhodes, everything zeroed out. 0 bass, 0 treble. Pretty standard. I like to usually give it a little bit more brightness. I'll bring the treble up to 3 on the slider here. That's really nice, especially up there. It's very pretty. So that's always handy. Bass is always good. This is what it sounds like with it all the way up. I see a lot of players use these all the way up. This adds a lot more color to the tone. A lot more presence when you have the treble and the bass pulled up all the way. I usually like to keep the bass centered. I usually don't like to drop out the bass because when you do that, it doesn't quite have as much presence even when everything's bottomed or rather zeroed out. So you know, that fills it out a little bit more. That's what I like. And then usually I'll bring the treble up to like 2. But if you pull the bass all the way down and the treble all the way up, you get a very thin. Yeah, not really my thing, but if you bring the bass all the way up, you sound like you're underwater. Almost muffled, and you get like none of the classic sound qualities. So I like to keep it at about there. That's typically where I like it, with 2 on the treble and bass at 0. Now, probably the most signature sort of sound that you hear with a Fender Rhodes is tremolo. And on the Fender Rhodes and on Fender amps, tremolo is usually called vibrato. That's technically not the same thing. And it's a bit of a misnomer because it's definitely tremolo on the Rhodes. Vibrato is if like the pitch of the sound was actually changing. In this case, the vibration is just going from channel to channel. And here's a very standard sort of medium vibrato speed. Like that. Because on this particular Rhodes, this is a 1979 suitcase model Rhodes, 73 keys. And the amp that it sits upon, the amp is its own keyboard stand, is a stereo amp. So you got 2 channels on each side. You have 2 speakers facing you and 2 speakers facing out towards the audience, which is cool. But you also have line outs and things like that on the side. But anyway, you get a very true tremolo as a result, which is very, very cool. As if you were using, say, like a Fender Twin or something like that, you could also get that effect as well. And it's always cool to have it built in with this, and you get a very true panning effect. Now, if you turn in the intensity all the way up, you get a true pan that goes from side to side. I don't know how well it's going to come across on the stream, but we'll hear it. It's a lot more pronounced. And especially if you slow the speed down, you'll notice it a bit more. Like that. So a lot of players like to use a wide sweep. A lot of players also like to use a bit more of a slightly less intense sound, which gives it just a little bit of texture. like having my vibrato up quite a bit, my tremolo up quite a bit. And I like to have that true kind of panning feel. If you had headphones on, it would be very dizzying, back and forth, back and forth. And this is the type of effect that of tremolo that Elmer Deodato likes to use. And Deodato, you might not know his name, but he wrote a lot of famous funk versions, arranged, I should say, a lot of famous funk versions of popular songs, and also had a lot of famous songs of his own right. Latin Flute was one. The one that I'm going to play shortly is called Super Strut. That's probably the most popular one that people know. It's in a lot of movies. And it's a really great funk standard, as it were, which is great. Stevie Wonder used to play with a lot of different sweeps with vibrato and stuff like that. You can hear it particularly on songs in the key of life. You can hear on like songs like Contusion and stuff like that. There's a lot of great panning Rhodes and stuff like that, which is a lot of fun. So yeah, here's a bit of a taste of hearing this really deep panning sound, but with a funk feel. And it can be a little dizzying if you're sitting right in front of it, but it's a very cool, very spacious, very immersive sound. So I'll play a little bit of Super Strut for you guys. Super Strut by Elmer Deodato. It's a killer song. It's even killer with the full rhythm section and the horns. I love that album. It's called Deodato 2, that album. You should check that out. It's got all of his classic favorites on that one. So if you're just tuning in, I'm Dylan DeFeo, your very own DD on the keys, and we're talking about the effects on the Fender Rhodes. And we just covered vibrato and a little bit of EQ, basic stuff, and now we're going to get to the real juicy stuff. We're going to get to the pedals right now, so that's going to be fun. But before we do so, don't forget, we're all, streaming to survive right now during this pandemic, all the musicians that I know, myself included. So if you are enjoying what you're hearing, it's not just fun and musical, but it's informative too. If you're enjoying that, feel free to donate, and that's on the attached PayPal link on my Twitch. So thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for tuning in. And now we're going to just go right down and run the gamut with the pedals. Actually, before I do that, one last word on tremolo. Suitcase Rhodeses have built-in tremolo, which is what I have right here. But sometimes you might have a stage Rhodes with you, and you might be going in direct to the board, you might be going into a single-channel amp, and you might not be able to get a true tremolo. Sometimes when I use my stage Rhodes, which is what I use live, I'll use this. This isn't in my pedal chain right now, but this is just a very basic tremolo pedal, panning pedal. It's got several different types of waveforms that you can choose from, and depth and rate. Behringer makes this. There's better ones out there, but you know, this will get the job done, you know, which is nice. You know, I'm not a big Behringer fan myself, but this has gotten the job done for me whenever I've needed it, which is really, really handy. But anyway, let's go into some of the ways that we're actually modifying the tone of the Rhodes. And when you do that, certain stomp boxes and certain effects pedals and just general sounds even done in post belong to kind of certain time periods of the Fender Rhodes. And to give you guys some perspective, the Rhodes was invented after World War II, the early models at least. The Rhodes bass, got one here. I got one behind me too, you can't really see it, but the Rhodes basses were invented first, and then it was eventually extrapolated to a piano around the time of the early 60s about. I would say about 64, 65, I think we started getting full-size Rhodeses out on the market. And then they really enjoyed their heyday from the beginning of the 70s, end of the 60s. First really popular record that had it on there would probably be Get Back by the Beatles. Billy Preston played that, and it's also on Come Together. You know, that's 1969. Riders on the Storm was probably one of the first prominent tracks with the Fender Rhodes. I played that last week on the stream, and that was 1971. So that was kind of the beginning of the Rhodes, and then throughout the 70s, this was the sound. Stevie Wonder, Doobie Brothers, Steely Dan, everyone was playing it. And one of the cool effects that people like to do, they like to put it through a phaser. And the phaser that I have here, it might be hard to see, this is a early 80s small stone, electro-harmonic small stone. And the two popular phasers that were used for the Rhodes would be the small stone in its various iterations, as well as the Dunlop, the MXR Phase 90. And I prefer the small stone myself because it has a little bit more variety to the sound. The Phase 90 on a slow phase is kind of like your Steely Dan sound. I like the variation of color that's in the small stone. You can get a couple different types of phase, and the reason why that this was popular, it simulated like a slow rotor, like on a Leslie speaker for like an organ. Now, it's very rare that we see a Rhodes going into a Leslie speaker. It's very cool when you do, though. I like it. But usually this is what we get. It's a different substance to a Doppler effect. You get more of that meow, the phase. But it's very, very cool. Mine's a little noisy, but we'll bear with it. So, to compare, here's the dry signal. Here's the signal with the phase. Hear how rich that is. I like that a lot. I like the depth of the one on the small stone. And that's on a fairly slow phase. You can bring the rate up a little bit, and that's a lot of fun. Some qualities of a vibrato or a tremolo, but it's a phase. And if you bring it down really slow, it gives you a very subtle texture. But that's really nice, though. It gives you a little bit of body to the sound. Now, the other color that I like on this is a more moist-sounding pattern. I love that. So, that makes you really feel and sound like you're underwater. and that's really cool. I think that comes across better on guitars sometimes, but this is really, really nice. I still love having the option. You combine that with a little bit of panning on the vibrato. I'll change the color. Very cool. Very lush sound. And The small stone was popularized in particular by the late great Richard T, who played keyboards for many people as a session player. He played in the band Stuff. One of my favorite songs that he uses this on was when he used to perform live in Grover Washington's band, and his version, or at least that version with Grover Washington of, what's that? Eric Ferrari. Hey, Eric, what's up? Sounds like Babe by Styx. A little bit. Yes, you're on the right track, for sure. I don't know for sure if it's the same effect, but I believe you're not far off. But yeah. But the one that I like, that Richard T plays is when he plays Mr. Magic. And I kind of like the way that pulse kind of goes in the mid and high range on that. So I'll get a little funky for you guys with a little bit of Phaser Rhodes on a little snippet of Mr. Magic. A little taste of how Richard T would have played Mr. Magic using the small stone phaser with Grover Washington Jr. So, a little bit of Mr. Magic. I love that. I love this phaser. I love it so much. I ended up getting one. I heard Richard T using it, and I really, really wanted to get one. And I managed to find one for pretty cheap. This is a vintage one. This is 1983, 84 about. They were making these. This is Sovtek. It actually has made in Russia on the bottom, written in Russian, I should say, actually in the bottom. So this was made behind the Iron Curtain, and the Soviet tech pedals are this big chunky sort of build of a pedal, and they all sound really, really cool. They have a particular kind of quality and sound and build to them, which is very cool. Maruka 199, hello, very nice. Oh, hi, this is Augusto. Hi, Millie. Hi, love you. But anyway, if you guys are just tuning in, I'm Dylan DeFeo. This is a delicious piping hot cup of chamomile tea from our friends at Bigelow. Thank you very much. My friends, at least. Anyway, and we're doing our effects pedals night here on the Rhodes, so this is a lot of fun. Some of the effects that I like to do, we just did phaser, we did tremolo before that, and some EQ stuff, so that's a lot of fun. And if you're just tuning in as well, again, we're streaming for our lives right now. So if you are enjoying the stream, enjoying what you're hearing, it's not just fun music, but informative and educational, feel free to donate. Be very gratefully accepted. My PayPal is attached to my Twitch page, so thank you very much. Now, moving along from phaser, and I'll bring my volume down there because always with the small sound phasers it drops a little bit, the volume. We go on to chorus. Now, if phaser Rhodes is kind of the sound of the 70s Rhodes, chorus would be more of the 80s Rhodes. And actually, I'm going to show you just one more thing with the phaser. Just a little sample. I've been trying to learn Peg by Steely Dan. I'll bring this up again. Maybe I'll bring the treble up a little bit. I see your picture, naming lights above it. I don't know the rest of the words, but I'm gonna just keep going. And then you get Michael McDonald in the background. Pig! Anyway, just wanted to play a little of that. That's another great example of the Rhodes phaser. The great Paul Griffin on keyboards on that one. I almost said Steely Dan was just singing that one, but Donald Fagen was just singing on that one. He usually plays a Fender Rhodes live. Paul Griffin was playing the Fender Rhodes with the phaser on that one. But anyway, little music history in there. Why not? Like I said, it's also educational, these streams. Anyway. Alright, so chorus is more of your 80s sound. And so you hear it gives it that more of that wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey kind of sound, kind of like that. Gives a little bit more of a jittery feel. Chorus actually modulates a lot of the tone besides just the signal. Phaser modulates the signal and sends it in on itself, and that's how you get the phase sound. The chorus actually modifying the tone itself. So it kind of, what chorus tends to do, it diverges the signal in a particular way that it basically makes the pitch go in and out of tune ever so slightly. And that's how you get that kind of wibbly wobbly. You wouldn't want to tune an instrument to a sound that's got chorus on, because then you're never going to get it in tune. So that's very 80s, and a lot of keyboards that came after the Fender Rhodes, like the Yamaha DX7, which was the first synthesizer to mimic a Fender Rhodes, chorus was a very popular effect on that, so you hear that on a lot of 80s songs, and although the sound is different, it's not exactly the same, but it's designed to mimic that with this. In a bit of a shameless plug, my example that I'm going to show with the chorus pedal is a song that I recorded using the chorus pedal on the Fender Rhodes. A song with the Maniacs and the Mailbox. You should check them out. We're on all the streaming platforms as well as Bandcamp. And, you know, lots of fun funk, Italian funk, basically. That's it's psychedelic jazz, it's a lot of fun stuff. And we did a song called Bruce U, where I use the chorus. The chorus that I'm using presently, that I use in my rig, is a Boss CE2. The Boss series of choruses are very popular among guitar players and very popular among Fender Rhodes players, and there's many different iterations and versions of them. The CE1 was the original. This is the CE2. I kind of like, it's a little juicier to my ear than a CE1. And then the CE3, you have a lot of different options that you can choose from, and I'm usually one that likes a lot of options, but with chorus, I tend to like a fairly, simple sound, a very slow chorus kind of feel, And again, this is another thing that was kind of designed to mimic a rotary speaker. It doesn't quite do it, but still pretty cool, and it's a very signature effect on its own. So I'm going to play a little bit of Bruce U by the Maniacs in the Mailbox, which, again, I recommend you go and stream us on all of the platforms or buy our record on Bandcamp is one of them, and iTunes as well. We're also on Tidal. When I say all the streaming platforms, I mean all the streaming platforms. We're on Tidal too. So, yes. And we have an EP coming out in the very near future, so stick around for that. But you got 8 tracks of funky Fender Rhodes goodness in there for you, so you're going to enjoy that. So here's a little taste of Bruce U. By the Maniacs in the Mailbox, using the CE2 boss chorus on the Rhodes. So that's fun. While I was playing, I was trying to think of other examples where this is prevalent. Matt Johnson, who plays for Jamiroquai, on his Rhodes, he uses, I think, the more recent boss CE chorus, where it's like more of a bigger pedal, almost looks like a line 6 pedal. Very, very cool stuff. And I'm just trying to see if I know any Jamiroquai off the top of my head. Candide. Don't you know this boogie is for real? No, I'm not even gonna try. I'm gonna try a little bit of candy. It's too intricate for me to know off the top of my head. I got to get some of those Napoleon Dynamite dance moves in there. Anyway, so that's chorus and phaser that I like to use. Those are a couple of classic effects. And again, if you're just joining us, my name is Dylan DeFeo, your very own DD on the keys here, going through some effects pedals on the Rhodes and classic effects in general. Did the vibrato that's built into the Rhodes, phaser, my small stone, chorus, my Boss CE2. Moving down the line, this is a little bit more unusual. I wouldn't even go so far to call it a classic effect. It's an effect that I like. And this is an Octaver / pitch shifter. This is a Electro-Harmonix Pitchfork. And I love this pedal because it has the ability to harmonize as well as double octaves. You can have it in either octaves up or octaves down, and it just sounds really cool. And the blend can add many dimensions of what you want to harmonize, which is a lot of fun. So let's take a look right here. I have it set. Oh, thank you, honey. I love you, honey. Thank you. Anyway, so I have it set to harmonizing a perfect fifth. And it's harmonizing the perfect fifth above the note that I'm playing. If I take the pin here in the middle and I switch it to dual, it'll do an octave above and an octave under. It's very cool stuff. Very cool, very full sound. I have the blend set at 12 o'clock, so it's kind of right in the dead center between hearing the harmony as well as the fundamental note that I'm playing. I'm going to bring it all the way down. So here's down at the neutral zone here. Creates a bit of a chorusing effect, actually, which is cool. So it can be a good backup chorus if you ever do need one. Switching it now, harmonizing the minor second. Obviously a little bit dissonant there. The minor second, literally a half step above what I'm playing. So if I play a C, it's adding a D flat in there. So it's literally colliding. We can go to the major second. So this would be as if I played C and D together. And also it's adding the octave above and the octave below. I'm going to switch it to just the octave above. Actually, it sounds a little nicer with the octave below. Which is very cool. That's a lot of fun. There's your major third. So a little more consonant, but very, very cool sounding. I love that, and if I mix that with a chorus or a Rhodes, it's a lot of fun. I'll do that with the chorus. Very psychedelic, neo-psychedelia sort of sound, and that's a lot of fun. But that's with the Pitchfork, we can keep going, and we got we got a perfect fourth. A little more open. Your perfect fifth. Very open. Then here's and then we get our major six. Another different quality. And then you get your dominant seven. A little gross. Here's where you get your octaves. And when you have the Rhodes, with some of those high octaves that it's layering on top, it gives you almost like a signed synth kind of sound, which I always like to do. And you can just play one thing and have a really full sound, a really cool lead sound. And this is cool if I like to maybe throw a hand on organ or something like that while I'm playing, and I could do a lead on the Rhodes. It has a synthy kind of a feel. Here's with 2 octaves. It's very, very cool. Here's with triple octave. That's nasty. Yeah, that's fun. I like having it usually around the 2-octave, especially for down there. Jackie Nee 500 says, "Oh, nice! That lower tone got some more sound in it now." Yes, it does, and that's what I like. I like using that with this. So yeah, it's got like that sinister kind of a lead, which is a lot of fun. Oh, sounds like this. That G's bearing is a little loose there. Oh, I like this stuff. What piano are you playing on? This is a 1979 Fender Rhodes Suitcase 73 keyboard. So this is vintage keyboard, lots of fun. I take this out on gigs. I'm a jazz and funk player and rock player. I take this out on a lot of gigs, and these are the effects that I use live, which is a lot of fun. So this is basically a tour of the pedalboard with this Fender Rhodes. So this is a lot of fun. Thank you for watching, Jackie. Thank you very much. So yeah, this is great. The Pitchfork is great. And I like blending it with some of my other effects, which I'll get to in a little while, to get a very kind of grungy, synthy kind of a sound. So that's a lot of fun. Speaking of grunge, we're going to go to overdrive. And now typically what we usually do for overdrive on a Rhodes, if we're going through a tube amp, you just crank the tube amp. And typically a Fender Rhodes is played through a Fender amp of some sort. But in some cases, you might have to go into the board, or you're using a solid state amp, and you might want to have some overdrive with you. The overdrive pedal that I have is an MXR Custom Badass 78, which is a lot of fun. I found this pedal. I found it. Literally, just lying around. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. So overdrive on Rhodes. Oh, you can already hear how hot the signal got. With the Rhodes, the whatchamacallit, the overdrive gets very throaty, very mid-rangey, and it's a lot of fun when you're doing rock in the jazz fusion era of like the 70s, like Chick Corea and Keith Jarrett played with a kind of an overdriven tone. John McLaughlin by Miles Davis, which is on the Bitches Brew record. The 78 Distortion, because it's got that kind of throatiness that you would almost get from like a tube amp. It's not quite as warm, but you do what you can. And this is a suitcase amp. The suitcase amp that belongs to the Fender Rhodes is solid state. So this is the best we can. It also has a crunch mode on here, so gives it a little more bite, which is a lot of fun. That's a lot of fun to do. And overdrive is interesting on the Rhodes. Like in a lot of live records that you hear that have a Fender Rhodes on it, you get these really kind of gnarly sounds, because people, the eternal struggle of a keyboard player, we're not really able to hear ourselves over the guitar players and everybody else. Our monitor mix isn't high enough, so we smash the keys, we turn our Rhodes as high as we can, and then you get that. If you listen to Dizzy Gillespie at Monterey Jazz Festival, I believe it's in, I think, 75, I think. His version of Monteca, there's a Fender Rhodes part on it. I think Claire Fisher plays it, actually. That's kind of the sound that he gets on that, which is really, really cool. So a lot of like that 70s kind of fusiony sound or rock sound even, you get a little bit more bite like that. Usually 2 bite, but this is the expression pedal, the distortion pedal that I prefer to use, which is a lot of fun. There's a lot of great, awesome distortion pedals that work great with this. I should probably do a shootout with it someday, borrowing some from some friends, some guitar player friends. I'd love to try an EHX Soul Food on this. I'd love to try a Rat on this, a Rat distortion, a Proco Rat. That'd be a lot of fun. That's usually done for like a Strat, like that lead, gnarly, nasty 70s tone. But anyway, that's distortion on this, and that's an MXR custom badass, which I love. I love MXR pedals. They don't take up a lot of room on your pedal board, and they sound fantastic. And if you're just joining us, I'm Dylan DeFeo, your very own DD on the keys. Thank you so much for tuning into our Rhodes pedalboard night, playing some fun tunes, doing some great, just some fun tunes. You know, I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying myself. Jackie Nee 500. Nice. I didn't know you could add so many effects on an old Rhodes piano. The distortion sounds nice. I'm also surprised that it doesn't make too much noise when you play notes close to each other. Yeah, you know, it's interesting. You know, in the low end, you know, and I got everything clean now. You know, it can get a little muddy in the low end if you're not careful. But, you know, with EQing and just the general design of the instrument, it usually sounds pretty decent, I think. With distortion way down low, it can get really muddy. But I kind of like that. And it's part of the character of the instrument, which is so great. But yeah, the distortion does sound really nice. I love distorting a Rhodes just a little bit, just having it break up just in the top of the mid range there, the mid highs, and it just sounds so nice. It's, you know, me competing with the guitars, so it's a lot of fun, which is good. And again, if you're just tuning in, going right down the gamut with all of my pedals here, which is a lot of fun. And if you're enjoying what you're hearing, feel free to donate to the PayPal. I, as well as many other musicians, we're streaming for our lives right now, so if you're enjoying what you're hearing, it's fun music, educational, please, I would be very grateful. It would be gratefully accepted. But anyway, enough of that. Let's get back to the music. Now, what do I have next? We got the Carbon Copy MXR. So now, delay on a Fender Rhodes is very, very popular too. You get that kind of a psychedelic sound, but also this appears on another Miles record called In a Silent Way. And I believe Chick Corea's Rhodes is the one that's got delay on it, because I think it's Chick Corea's on it. Joe Zawinul plays organ. There's another Rhodes, and I don't think it's Herbie Hancock. It could be Keith Jarrett. I don't know for sure. I'm gonna have to look that up. If anyone out there is on Wikipedia, look up In a Silent Way by Miles Davis. Find out who played the second Rhodes. I'm pretty sure it's not Herbie, and I know Chick Corea is one of them. Joe Zawinul plays the organ. But anyway, but one of those Rhodes is on that record, has delay on it. In some records, does Sheep by Pink Floyd have it? No, Sheep is just tremolo. But anyway, but this is really cool. So this is where you get your psychedelic space noises, which is great. Now, traditionally, we use an analog tape delay on a Fender Rhodes. And back in the old days, they used to use the Roland Space Echo with the tape dial that you would actually have to dial it in. This behaves in a similar way. It jitters when you change the delay speed. You know, that's very Fly Like an Eagle right there. Though Fly Like an Eagle's a Hammond. I'm going to do some streams on the Hammond at a later date. But I get the mix up here. The mix is at about 2, 3 o'clock about. The regeneration is at about 8, 9 o'clock roughly. And the delay I have at around... Yeah, that's the one I like. That's at about 5 o'clock. So I like to do stuff where I'm able to get harmonies over one another when I go down. So I'm just going to do something that I do. I'm going to shamelessly plug the Maniacs and the Mailbox one more time. I love being in that band, and I miss those guys so dearly. I love you guys. We do a song called Satellite Plumber, and this is one where I like to harmonize with myself in the solo. So... full. guitar. I love the carbon copy because it really behaves like a vintage tape delay, which is so much fun. And I wish I owned a vintage tape delay, but someday. They're very expensive. Someday. But anyway, now to give you an example, actually, I'm not going to actually plug it in because it's a little noisy, but this is a vintage one that I use sometimes. This is actually from my dad. Thank you, Dad. From his DJing days back in the 70s, 80s. This is a Gemini E-Quarter, and this is really cool. I got to figure out why it's so noisy. You can still see the chalk marks from where my dad had his effects set for fades and stuff. But this is not a tape delay, but it's more of like an echo chamber, an echoplex, which is a lot of fun. It's a very similar sort of analog delay kind of device. Another one that's similar to this is the Binson Echo Rec, and that's one that Rick Wright used on his Farfisa organ in the early days of Pink Floyd. That's the one that you hear on Echoes and things of that nature, all the Syd Barrett records. So very, very similar, which is really cool. And I love this. When I get this not quite as noisy, I'll do one with this, which is a lot of fun. So this is really, really cool. But anyway, so that's delay. And before I get to the big boy here, the Moogerfooger, I also, gonna have a brief word about Wah. I have a Crybaby down here, just a standard Dunlop Crybaby. Wah doesn't really occur a whole lot on the Rhodes. Herbie Hancock used a little bit of Wah, but usually he used Wah mostly on his clavs, his clavinets, not so much on his Rhodes. But one thing that you can hear a Wah Rhodes on a very popular record, I'm going to once more turn to my dear, dear favorite band, The Doors. If you listen to the LA Woman record, and when everything slows down on LA Woman, and you hear, I thought it was guitar for a while, but then I realized it was a Rhodes. Ray does some Wah Rhodes. If I can get the lick right. Yeah, it's kind of like that, I don't have time to play all of LA Woman right now, but anyway, that's the one thing that you can really hear Wah on a Rhodes on a prominent record. Not something that occurs a whole lot. It's not, the Rhodes has more of a throaty, that mid-rangey sort of sound, a drier sound. On a sound that has more of a pluck feel, like a clavinet, it works so much better, and it gets really funky really fast. I'm not saying that it doesn't sound good, it sounds really fun. And you have that sustain, so you can really around with it, which is fun. Sir Catablipause. Hey! Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. So that's fun and that's funky. I think, if I had an envelope filter, I think that would have been a lot better to use for that. But I have this Wah, and it gets the job done. I'm more of a crybaby. I'm more of a crybaby. No, I'm more of a crybaby Wah guy than a Vox Wah guy. But I actually would like to try more Wahs on the Rhodes to see if one sounds good. I'd love to see what a Morley does on this. I think that'd be really, really cool. Anyway, last but not least, we got the ring modulator, the Moogerfooger. Now, this is the weird one. Now, this is one that is used, it can be used for many, many purposes. You can get really crazy, spacey sounds out of it, but you can also use it as a very utilitarian device, which I really enjoy. This can be a pseudo overdrive if you need. This can be a pseudo tremolo if you need. And then it can just get weird. So, this is a genuine Moog, Moogerfooger ring modulator. And I have it set right now, kind of doing a really fast tremolo kind of thing. Let me lower the rate, or the frequency rather. Raise the frequency rather. So you hear there you start to get some modulation. So you get a lot of stuff after the fact that it doesn't really blend too much over the actual dry Rhodes sound, but if you bring the mix up, kind of makes it a little bit more synthesized with a bit of a bell tone. That's almost like that steel drum sound that Keith Emerson gets on Carnival 9 First Impression Part 3, And then he does, what does he do on that? He does St. Thomas. So, it wasn't perfect, but that's the idea. And he does like a... And it really emphasizes that metallic tone, which is very, very, very cool. You have a drive knob, so this can actually, again, act a little bit more of a hot channel. A little bit of giant steps with a ring modulator. And then you have multiple frequencies. As you switch it to the low frequency from the high frequency, hear how you get a little bit more of a tremolo feel. I'll play without talking over it. Yeah, when you bring the frequency up and the drive up a bit, you can really mutilate the sound quite a lot with it, which is fun though. I love making a lot of cacophony with this, but also a lot of players in the 70s, Chick Corea would use this with Miles Davis to get kind of an overdrive and tremolo thing. Jan Hammer with the Mahavishnu Orchestra used to use this just to mangle the tone, which was cool. But that's, with your high frequency bit, and I can switch it also to, so that was on a square wave, I'll do it on a sine wave. See, I like to keep the mix so that way you can hear still a little bit of the Rhodes in there, so that way it doesn't over preclude it, because then some of the harmonics you won't be able to really hear what key you're playing in. Get some kind of throaty drive a bit. So now here's if I put a whole bunch of them on. So we're gonna have phaser, we're gonna have a little bit of the pitchfork, why not, and a little bit of delay. We'll see what happens. That's incredible. That is a ton of fun. But also, one other thing I forgot to mention on the carbon copy, you have a mod button on the top there that actually triggers a bit of chorus, so gives it a little bit more of a jittery tape delay. So it gives it almost a little bit more of a vintage feel, but then you get a little more modulation in there. But anyway, yeah, so that is pretty much what I like to use with the Fender Rhodes. You can add so many different effects. Like Jackie Nee said, I didn't know you can add so many effects on an old Rhodes, and that's true, because on this Rhodes, the suitcase model, you have an effects loop built in to the Rhodes, actually, into the preamp. You have an ascend and return, which is really, really cool, and that's what I'm using right now. Because back in the old days, you used to have to take the Rhodes top off, this plastic top, and actually tap into the RCA cable right onto the harp of the piano, and Herbie Hancock talks about this in his book. He says, you know, he was on a gig, he had, you know, effects on his Rhodes, and Harold came up and was just like, you know, Harold Rhodes, who invented the Fender Rhodes, he comes up to him and says, you massacred my piano, you know, what do you need me to modify? And he goes, well, it'd be nice to put an effects loop on there, and that's how a Rhodes got an effects loop, so we thank Herbie Hancock for that, actually, which is pretty cool. But you could also just have them in sequence, you know, in a chain on a single channel Rhodes, like a stage Rhodes, just like you would any guitar. You know, it's the same sort of concept that applies. So the possibilities are endless, and I love trying different combinations and just seeing what happens. I mean, you heard there was some great ambient stuff, some great synth sounding stuff, but then you get that metallic kind of edge from the Rhodes underneath that doesn't quite happen on a synthesizer. So the possibilities are limitless, and that's what's a lot of fun with this keyboard, and with being a keyboardist that gets to try all these things, which is a lot of fun, which is cool. So thank you all so much for tuning into the stream. I had an absolute blast playing for you guys. Next week, I think I might actually do a stream on organ, so if you have any requests that you'd like to hear on the organ, I'm mainly a jazz organist, but I also play rock and blues and soul and anything, you know. Call them out. I'll be taking requests on the organ, which will be a lot of fun, on the Hammond, on this Hammond right here, on my SK2. So that's going to be a lot of fun. So again, I'm Dylan DeFeo, your very own DD on the keys. And again, we all the musicians here in New York, we are streaming for our lives right now. So if you enjoyed what you heard today, feel free to donate to the PayPal attached to my page. I would be very, very grateful, and all of the musicians that you support are very, very grateful for all of your support at this very difficult time. But it just feels good to perform. It feels good to play keyboards for a wonderful audience, and yeah, it just feels really, really good to be performing for you guys. So thank you all so much for tuning in. Eric, Millie, Jackie, Sir Catablipos, I hope I'm saying that right. Thank you all for your comments, and thank you for all for tuning in. We'll see you all next week. And oh, before I forget, follow me on all of the stuff. I'm DD on the Keys not only on Twitch, but I'm DD on the Keys on Instagram and Twitter. You can find me on Facebook at Dylan DeFeo Music. I think if you search DD on the Keys, you'll still find it. But that's Dylan DeFeo Music. And my PayPal is also DD on the Keys as well. And yeah, I'm always on Instagram and posting fun stuff, and it's cool. So, and once this pandemic is over, you'll be able to keep track of where I'm playing at a venue near you, hopefully. So, thank you so much for tuning in. Stay healthy, stay well, and I will see you guys for more keyboard shenanigans next week. Thanks again.